You know, you had your first meeting with the Queen as Governor General, and the rest of us will never get to experience that. What's it like?
It was a wonderful day. I think one of my best days since I became a human on this earth. It was very heartwarming, and she was very welcoming. She was very sharp, and talked a lot about, you know, her own children and her grandchildren, and also about the situation we're facing in Ukraine. That was at the top of her mind yesterday, and is very worried about what's going to be happening to people in Ukraine.
I would imagine she has a unique perspective on it, having lived through the Second World War, hearing the air raid sirens, knowing what it's like when a city gets bombed.
Oh, she did mention that, yes, and you know, during the years of the Hitler regime, I guess she was very much affected by that, and I think she could almost see some similarities happening, and she talked about that.
You've both recovered from COVID. I mean, you seem in fantastic health. Do you end up sharing your COVID experiences?
A little bit, yes, and yeah, she's recovering, she said, quite nicely, and still has a way to go, but she's feeling good. Yeah, and I had COVID not too long ago, and thank goodness for vaccines, I didn't get too sick. She was very much aware of the fact that, and I did talk about it, that people generally have had a bad experience through COVID. The mental illness in Canada has risen quite dramatically over the 2.5 years. You know, the services aren't adequate, particularly for indigenous people, but also for other Canadians. And when we talked about the war that's happening in Ukraine, people that are displaced and have nowhere to go do experience many levels of mental health issues, especially children. When you see the children that are either with parents or even on their own, that these people will require a lot of support.
What would you like to see Canada do?
Well, Canada has done a lot, and I think in terms of the humanitarian side, I think we can do more. Perhaps take more people into our country so that they can make it their home, or when they want to go back, they can go back if that's possible. So that kind of thing requires a lot of work and commitment by Canadians to welcome people from Ukraine. Now, I'm not involved on the side where they have to, you know, go through a process. But aside from that, I see a need. I see that we can do more.
You know, you hear people talk about it's difficult to come to Canada. I mean, you have to go through the websites, or you have to get to the embassies, and there's a lot of paperwork, and how do they get from A to B? Would you like to see a more robust effort, Canadians at the borders there ready to help process people?
Well, I don't really know how the process works, but I think, you know, you are right that the system is quite difficult. I think we need to look at how we bring in people from other countries and make it perhaps a little bit more simpler. I know that when we have to fill out forms from the indigenous community, people always find it very difficult, even though it's within our own country. So I can't imagine what it's like for people coming into the country. So when I do my cross-country work, I hope to be able to connect with Ukrainian people across the country and talk to them about how they feel and how they see the situation.
When you were with the Queen, I understand you shared with her this Inuit concept of ayuineta. Can you tell me what that is and how she reacted to that?
Yes, ayuineta is a word in our language that is an old word. The old word ayuineta means that if you're confronted with adversity or things that are difficult, you keep going, you don't give up. and you need to make a commitment to continue to make changes.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been periods in the Inuit history that has been extremely difficult, and that word was often used as a way of either saying goodbye, or as you're going out you say "Ayun nada," you know, like that, and
Keep going.
yeah, keep going.
And that was important for you to share with the Queen.
Because I was talking to her about the various situations, like in Canada, the historical wrongs of the past, and how we needed to change Canada's history books so that young people could learn what the real history is without necessarily pointing fingers.
And do you feel like the Queen is a partner in this moment, that this matters to her at this point in her life?
Yes, it does matter. Yes, she's very interested in what's going on in Canada. She talked about, you know, the truckers that came to Ottawa, and she knows all of it.
Did that surprise her?
She didn't say she was surprised. I think she found difficult to understand. And it's like the Ukraine crisis. She finds that difficult to understand.
What's your sense of how engaged she is on the notion of reconciliation and the reality of the unmarked graves in Canada in particular?
She is very aware, and we talked about reconciliation, and I did talk about the need for healing in our country, and to have a better understanding and a better relationship between Indigenous people and other Canadians.
It's the next 10 days or so. The delegations are going to Rome, Métis, Inuit, and Indigenous, to, I think, begin in earnest this process of ensuring that the Pope listens, to ultimately come to Canada and apologize. How much meaning do you put on that moment?
I put a lot of meaning into it. The expectations are very high, and a lot of Indigenous people feel that this is something that the Catholic Church must do. And anytime there is an interaction that takes place between the Pope's office and Indigenous leaders, I see it as a positive thing, because that connection has to be made, and there has to be a lot of work leading up to the time that the Pope will come to Canada. And it's not clear what he plans to do in Canada at this point. So those discussions are very critical right now.